Greetings, my scattered sisters and brothers in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that his presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. Well, we are entering into Mark chapter 10, and it's a pretty interesting conversation, pretty complex, really, and difficult. Chapter 10. Jesus then left that place and went into the region of Judea and across the Jordan. Again, crowds of people came to him. As was his custom, he taught them. Some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" "What did Moses command you?" Jesus replied. They said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." "It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law," Jesus replied. "But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, "Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery." Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're not going to get it all done in this session. There's really one or two things that I want to think about for today. Number one, in terms of divorce, it touches everyone. I don't know of a family that has not been touched by divorce in some way. It's pretty prevalent. And it was prevalent in Jesus' day, and especially prevalent in the Greco-Roman world. And we think the Gospel of Mark is written for folks in Rome, and so divorce was very prevalent there. And so just to recognize that divorce is very much a prevalent reality that touches every family. The second thing I want to take note of is the reason for divorce. And I know that there's many reasons for divorce, but basically when people get married, they make a promise to each other. They enter into covenant, promising to love and to cherish till death do us part, no matter what comes. And divorce happens when something is privileged above that promise. It might be privileging money above that promise. It might be privileging safety above that promise. Maybe career, maybe freedom, any number of reasons, but a promise is made in a wedding ceremony. People commit to a lifetime of marriage, and then something becomes privileged, one or both, husband and wife, privilege something above the promise. And when they privilege something above the promise, that's when divorces happen. And so, all kinds of reasons, but something is getting privileged above the promise that was made when marriage was entered into. What I find especially interesting here is the context, the place in the story of the Gospel of Mark where this comes up. And so you'll remember that before we moved from Galilee, Capernaum, to this new place, the disciples had been arguing with each other about who is the greatest. And just prior to that, Jesus had taught them for the second time about how he was going to Jerusalem and he was going to be crucified. The disciples don't understand, and they start arguing with each other about who's the greatest. And we saw that they arrived at a house and Jesus started to question them, and Jesus started to teach them that whoever wanted to be great must become the servant of all. And then we had various lessons, and finally Jesus says, "Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other." And that's how chapter 9 ended up. And they left that house and they moved to this new territory. And after those words, have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other, our next question is a question about divorce. And then where this conversation is going to go is eventually the disciples are going to hear the teaching of the cross once again, and there's going to be another move for power amongst them, And Jesus is going to let them know that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So this divorce question, or if you prefer, this marriage discussion, divorce and marriage question and lesson, it comes between teachings of the cross, right smack in the middle of Jesus' second and third teaching about the cross. And it comes right on the heels where Jesus has been emphasizing the importance of serving all and having humility amongst yourselves and being at peace. Could it be that that's intentional in terms of where we have this teaching about divorce and this lesson about marriage, that it's intentionally placed between the teachings of the cross and the call to serve all and the call for humility? Maybe that's the key in terms of keeping our marriage promises, that the key is to live surrendered to the call of the cross, to live surrendered to Jesus' call of discipleship. And that really that should be the only thing that would take privilege over the marriage promise, is the call of Jesus to live surrendered and to practice humility. And that as we answer Jesus' call and begin to imitate his way of life in terms of servanthood, maybe that would make for healthy marriages, a way to get past divorce and to fulfill our promises by that humility, by being a servant, by practicing, following Jesus and being the servant in the context of our marriages. Now, I know that not everyone who's watching this is married, and I know that many are divorced and remarried. And it's kind of like, okay, well, here we have this kind of, pristine teaching. How do we apply it? What do we do in the midst of our kind of messiness? I think the key is to follow Jesus, to hear his call, and then to begin to practice his way of serving and exercising humility, that we might dwell with peace. And so wherever we're at in the messiness, to hear the call of Jesus and to follow him and to put his ways into practice could be the best thing that ever happens to our marriages. Well, God bless. Have a great day, and hear the call and follow humbly.